is a true power-packed panel which is being moderated by Mr. Dilip Modi, founder Spice Money. And joining Mr. Modi on the panel today, we have Sunil Kumar Tadepalli, co-founder Avanti Finance Private Limited. Mr. Mukul Saxena was supposed to join us today. In fact, I've been told he was on his way, but he couldn't join us because of the Delhi rains. And Ashwani Arora, SVP, Global Head Customer Success Team, FinOne. Mr. Gaurav, Seth, Chief Finance Officer and Head Institutional Business, Airtel Payments Bank. So I'd like to invite all of you on the stage, please.
I think we have Gaurav? Yeah. Oh, you ready?
So please give a huge round of applause to our panelists. So with this, I'd like to hand over the panel to you.
Thank you so much. I hope you all can hear me. I know there's a lot of noise. Thank you so much for bearing the rain and being with us this afternoon. I know, Gaurav, you just managed to make it. We lost one of our panelists in the rain. They're stuck and therefore managed to take a U-turn. But we've got great weather outside, so I hope you enjoy the session here as much as you enjoy the weather outside. So, friends, we have a great panel here with us today. It's a very important topic amongst the many other topics that you've been listening through today. This is on serving the underserved. And I think, I was going through the sessions, and I think this is the only one which actually talks about the underserved opportunity. So I really hope that through this session, we can get some insights on what truly is this opportunity and what's happening in India around it. So before I ask the panelists to introduce themselves, I'd like to just share with you that the unique opportunity we have in India, and most of you are entrepreneurs in the audience, is that when we talk about a unicorn, we generally talk about $1 billion valuation. But I think the real opportunity is how do you build a franchise that can serve 1 billion people? And I think that's the big opportunity that fintechs in India have, to be able to think through what is it that we can do in terms of products that can cater to 1 billion people. And we've got people on the panel who are thinking about that every day. So let me start, Sunil, with yourself. If you could just introduce what you do. We were talking a bit about, Avanti Finance and what it does. So your take on the underserved opportunity and how are you going about it? Sunil, over to you.
It's working? Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Dilip, and thanks, everyone, for having us over here. I represent Avanti. We are a platform trying to get into the underserved and the unserved segments in India. Our sweet spot is rural. I look into the growth. I'm the chief of partnerships, and primary focus is to see how we can get credit to the unserved or the underserved. But whenever we talk about inclusion, I think the way we are defining inclusion is on 3 parameters, right? Inclusion means first, the promise of access needs to be there for these women who are in the rural hinterland, who have no access to other formal services. Access is important. Second thing that we talk about when we talk about inclusion is agency. Agency means it is about choice. Today, people like us who have verifiable documents for income and expenses, we have choice. But these people tend not to have so much of a choice. So access, agency become 2 critical points. And the third and the more important thing from an inclusion is affordability. So affordability necessarily does not mean the cheapest, but affordability means in the context of what we are trying to drive is the ability to pay the commitment flows matching with the cash flows and still be able to save. So that is how we are defining inclusion as access, agency, and affordability. We operate in a completely paperless and a presence-less model. Thankfully, our use cases have come to life. We feel quite happy to be sitting over here as Avanti to share a credible story. We are in 30% of India's districts out of 22 states. We have more than 60 plus of aligned partners through whom we reach out. It's a combination of social referencing, crowdsourcing, and the stack, Aadhaar-based stack that we have built, that we are reaching out. So Dilip, happy to answer. Yeah.
Sunil, if you could just talk about, you said that when you joined this company, you had 2 Padma Vibhushans and 1 Padma Bhushan in the room. Can you just talk about the background of how did Avanti get born?
Thanks for that. So it was sometime in 2014, 2015 when Mr. Tata took over Tata Trusts as the chairman. He had this idea of trying to give a different flavor to philanthropy. And he had sort of had this vision about India, shared that with Nandan Nilekani. Both of them came together and they roped in Dr. Vijay Kelkar. So Mr. Tata is a Padma Vibhushan, Nandan, and Dr. Kelkar, ex-finance secretary and deputy governor for RBI. All 3 of them saw that India is blessed with demographic dividend. But if we don't unlock this potential of this vast country, which is entrepreneurial in nature, on a lighter side, the English called as the nation of shopkeepers, right? But it's entrepreneurship. If we don't unlock this digital dividend, very soon it can become a demographic nightmare. So they came together and they envisioned Avanti and they said, let's light up 100 million households in terms of the promise of credit and unlock the potential. That's how Avanti was born.
So I'll come back to you, Sunil, because we'd like to hear some more stories about how you've tapped into those 100 million households so far. If I can come to you, Gaurav, you're from Airtel Payment Bank. We all know Airtel as one of India's largest telcos. But I was reading that one of the visions of Airtel Payment Bank is to change the way India banks. So can you just lay light to the audience about what is the vision you're chasing and how you're looking to serve the underserved?
Yeah, so before I get to the vision... Right. Yeah, thanks, Dilip. So before I get to the vision as to what we are doing, actually I want to go back to the fact that why was Airtel Payments Bank sort of envisaged? And when I go back 4-5 years, when we took the license, one of the key reasons why we took the license was, one, we had a very, very strong distribution network. Okay. 2, our customer base, our relationship with our customers was very strong, the telcos. Now, as we sort of started growing this, what we've realized is why distribution is extremely important is, see, every time we go to the rural segment, one of the key lacks is trust. The key lack is trust. Because in the rural segment, people do not trust anyone, and therefore they want to bury the money in their household itself. That's the key issue. However, as we went and tapped into the distribution network of Airtel and we converted them into the DCs, what we realized was these are people, these are villagers who actually have grown into a retailer of Airtel sitting within the village, and therefore the trust of that a villager has on them is extremely high. This led to the villagers starting and coming and talking to them, or the distributors going and talking to the villagers, vice versa, about Airtel Payments Bank, about the ability to deposit, about the ability for you to open an account so that when the migrant labor who's in the city and who's sending money to the villages, you can withdraw it from the bank account. So that is what was the vision. That is, as you mentioned, have an account, have a distribution at every kilometer, and that's what we are progressing towards.
Thank you, Gaurav. We'll come back and talk more. Ashwani, if I can come to you, you operate in many countries. You have a large lending and transactions platform business. If you could share with the audience, how do you see the underserved opportunity?
Sure. Thanks, Dilip, and thank you for having me here. It's my privilege to be part of this panel. So I represent Nucleus Software. I hope I'm audible till the end. Okay. So I represent Nucleus Software. We have been into market since 1986. And we have been a bit disruptive since beginning. When everyone was moving to IT services sector, we decided to make a world-class solution coming out of India. And our approach to financial inclusion has been simple. I think a staunch belief in making a difference and using technology to solve it. And we always wanted to make an impact in society, and eventually it got translated into our vision of making financial service access easy and enriching worldwide. That's why we have been helping our partners to mass distribute and manage their retail lending products on a platform. I'm happy to share 75% plus of the retail lending in India runs on our platform. And I think, or shall we say, 3 out of 4 Indian aspirations gets fulfilled on our platform. During the journey, our founder and MD met Mr. Mohammed Yunus. I think we all know him, banker of the poor and the father of micro lending. And that further reinvigorated the passion to work for the underbanked, and that's where we moved to the solutions for the low-cost ticket size and the microfinance. One of the solution we have been, which fits into the theme is Payse, which is the first offline wallet and online as well. We are empowering the rural India by lowering the cost of cash, building their credit history, and so that they can bank cashless. This is the first solution which got certified on RBI's regulatory sandbox. Eventually, we also moved on to SME and the corporate lending because we felt there's a huge gap when the opportunity is big, $330 billion. And 11% is only served at the moment. So I think the solutions went into SME and corporate lending as well. One thing I think while designing solutions, one thing we have to take care is we can't be generic. That's where I think for example, for microfinance, teams visited the villages. They could sit with the users, could empathize with the pain points, could understand the kind of hours women have to wait in the bank branches, and the kind of they feel humiliated and they don't want to visit the branches, and the amount of money they spent on each visit which they want to avoid. So I think we have been following the design thinking approach to solve the problems using technology. We are present in 50 countries and 200 plus customers, which help us to get the best practices imbibe into our solutions. Lastly, we have been working actively on making 100 rupees loan possible and profitable, and we have done a good progress, and looking forward for making a monumental progress in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwani. I would really encourage everyone in the audience to really think about, how rural India operates, because all of us live in big cities and big towns. On this panel, you've got people who are every day thinking about how to serve rural India. So I think let's use this opportunity once we've had an initial round of questions to get some questions and interaction going with the audience so we can interact together. Just to complete the panel, I would like to introduce you to what the company that I'm part of does, which is Spice Money. We are a rural fintech ourselves, and our background is that of telecommunications, a bit like Airtel. We were Spice Telecom earlier, and now we are Spice Money. Our focus is basically that over the last 10 years, a number of bank accounts have opened for customers across rural India. A lot of you will recall the whole Jan Dhan strategy of the government of India. 400 million bank accounts getting opened over a period of 4 to 5 years. The challenge was that while everyone in rural India was being given a bank account, they still had to travel 8 to 10 kilometers to get to a bank branch or an ATM machine to be able to access their bank account. Where technology has come in is really to solve for that problem. And Spice Money is born because of the presence of Aadhaar stack, where everyone's got an Aadhaar identity, and that's got seeded into their bank account. So what we do at Spice Money is we've built out a platform which enables a small merchant in a village to function like a bank branch. And effectively what happens is customers, when they get subsidies into their bank account, instead of them going to an ATM machine, they walk to their nearest merchant, authenticate themselves using Aadhaar. The money moves from the customer's account to the merchant's bank account, and the merchant pulls out cash and gives it to the customer. So it's extending the reach of ATM banking network deep into rural India. And Gaurav, what you said about the need for distribution and trust, I think Sunil, will hear from you about how rural India builds trust on communities, and we've seen that very deeply. So the way lending works in rural India is very different from what we see in urban India, and I'm hoping that we'll learn from the panel on that today. So maybe Sunil, if I come back to you, we all talk about the underserved opportunity, But why is it still an opportunity? Why hasn't it been grabbed by many? Why is there not a lot of players out there? What are some of the challenges that you see? So define the opportunity for us, and then define the challenges that there are to, unlock this opportunity.
So I'll make an attempt, Dilip. It's a big question. So sharing this with all humility that I can muster, we've traveled quite a bit and we've sort of had interactions with the customers. I think the fundamental disconnect that we have seen is encapsulated in this question that should we scale what works, or should we actually look at should we look at scaling what works, or should we identify opportunities to make things work at scale? It's a different sort of a lens. What works at scale requires us to look into not as a transaction between an organization to an end customer. What works at scale needs to be looked in more as an ecosystem play. So today when we talk about our experience, close to about 45% of our credit goes to the agri side. Now the way we are able to do this, to give credit to the small and subsistence farmers, is because of the ecosystem play. So there is a technical partner who is providing inputs to enhance the production. There is an input partner who is providing the best of the seeds and the fertilizers to start the process. And there is an output linkage partner who is assuring the pickup at a predefined rate. And there are also social partners who are taking some of these commodities and putting it on advanced market like Buy the Bazaar or NCDX, etc., and sharing the yield to the individual farmers. So when you put up this lens of ecosystem, we believe the solutions will emerge. Rough cut at the back of the envelope calculation, when we started the journey, we looked into the unserved, underserved to be close to about 356 million. That is roughly the size of United States. So if we can bring them into the gamut of formal financial services, the multiplier effect that it will have. So that's what we are after. So I don't know if I've answered, Dilip. The point is, we need to start looking at it less as a transaction and more as an ecosystem play. And that's where possibly the nugget or the answer is. So we are hoping to reach that point.
Sunil, you said 356 million. Can you just explain that number? Like, what do you mean by 350? We are 1.4 billion, right, as a country. So how does that number stick vis-a-vis that?
So, the math of that is that if you look into smallholder subsistence farmers on a pan-India basis, micro SMEs or MSMEs, and if you look into the MFI segment that is serving, if you put all of this together and if you generally see a compounding and see how much of this pool can actually expand, you end up roughly with a number of 350 to 356 million of households, not individual borrowers. And that's the opportunity. And out of that, we are saying, can we touch at least 100 million through this scheme?
Wonderful. So just for the benefit of the audience, if you look at the number of UPI users in the country, right, we talk about a number of what, 220 million? 250 million, that's the number we talk about, right? And UPI is the biggest thing that's happened to us as an industry. And here we have someone talking about 356 million unserved. So truly, it's a big opportunity, right?
It's a huge opportunity. And it's not just about the bottom of the pyramid kind of a concept. It's about unlocking the true potential that Bharat has. I think the $1 trillion economy or other stuff, if I can stretch my limb on that one, is based on Bharat. So it will come from that side rather than on the urban or the peri-urban side. So that's a humble view.
I'm really hoping that many of you walk out of this room wanting to address this opportunity. That's why I really wanted to come down to you absorbing the size of this opportunity. Gaurav, tell us, you are at Airtel. How many customers does Airtel have as a telco?
As a telco, we have around 333 million.
330 million.
Approximately.
330 million, right? So as Airtel Payments Bank, what's the opportunity you see?
Interesting question, because I'll just take over from where he left. And we were also doing some analysis, and what we realized is, see, the country has around over 650,000 villages, which has approximately 65% of the population of the country. The GDP of these villages all taken together is around 47%, give or take. However, the moment we talk of credit, I'm not talking of volumes, I'm talking of value, or deposits, it falls down to maybe high single digits, maybe 10, 12%. And therefore, the opportunity is to convert all of these deposits, the opportunity of deposits, the opportunity of credit, into a formal credit or a formal deposit. Because what is happening today, and as we all know, most of these villagers are going to the sahukars, are going to the village pradhan or the locals, and they are taking loans at 35%, at 36%, even more, which is killing for them. And therefore, there is an opportunity to bring them into the formal economy, drive deposits. The moment you start driving deposits, there is a score that they can, a credit score can start developing for them. And that's where, while I haven't interacted with Avanti, but I think that's where Avanti will, and other organizations will come in and start giving credits to these. The second opportunity, Dilip, in my mind is the reach itself to these consumers. Now, India, the number of bank branches that we have anyways are far less than the population. However, the moment we go to the villages, for every 1 lakh adults, we have 6 branches. And as we all know, villages are going to be small villages, 5,000, 7,000, and therefore we are talking of a branch being 14, 15 kilometers away from a village. And therefore making it absolutely impossible for him, for the consumer to go and sort of do transactions. And I think that's where players like you, players like us, they come in and start solving problems by making the retailer the banker, by making the local villager a banker and solving the problem for them. So that's what my suggestion.
So it's very clear that the size of the opportunity is immense. Ashwani, you work in multiple countries, right? How do you see the opportunity?
Dilip, I think the opportunity mostly I think we have been focusing now on India, and I feel the biggest gating factor for the reaching to the masses is the operational cost of the systems. That's where I think if you look at the MSME market, which is $330 billion, and it's hardly being served. So I think it's the operational cost which is not allowing the lenders to reach to them. And now I can see a lot of big techs coming into play, like Google has tied up with Flexi Loans, Facebook has tied up with Indify. So I think the big techs are going to make the last mile access easy. Plus if you look at the mobile penetration, which is touched 800 million, internet has touched 830 million. So all of these factors are probably going to take us very near to the mobility being the main driver, wherein most of the digital financial inclusion is going to happen on the mobility devices. And that's what I think you will learn from the African countries, which is coming out to be a big hub for the mobile money services, is crossing the normal bank accounts. So I see a very huge opportunity in India as well as across.
Ashwani, so you see Africa as a big learning for India when it comes to the unserved?
Yeah, I think if I talk about the global perspective, one amazing use case which is least expected coming from a country like Kenya. If you look at the M-Pesa initiative, I think the kind of financial inclusion which Kenya got it in 15 years, they were standing at 26%. Now it stands at 83%. And the number of accounts on mobile money is more than on the bank branches. And interesting fact is it has given a lot of opportunities to the lot of ecosystem in terms of 6 lakhs M-Pesa agents have come into the ecosystem. And the average Kenyan is able to save 20% more compared to the earlier before this initiative. So I think a lot is happening in Africa and is a spread across sub-African, and 24 countries wants to copy the digital economy blueprint of Africa to be taken forward. Latin America is copying the same model. I think we see a lot of payment happening in China, which is leading to 90% of the payments happening through the QR codes, which is leading a lot of digital footprints for them to be included into the formal sector. And Europe is moving very fast with regards to government giving all the wages and the social benefits in the accounts. So I can see a lot of areas where we can take the global perspective and take it back to the India.
So before I go to the audience, our theme is, sorry, you want to say something, Sunil?
Yeah, so Ashwani, one of the unique things that we have seen in this market, right? So why doesn't this kind of a penetration happen in India? So there is the network, there are the numbers, etc. Most of us know who are from the industry. Unfortunately, a smartphone is not the prerogative of a woman in rural India, and that's a big, huge challenge. It has always been there is a smartphone at a household level. So the gender and the cultural concept, which is very strongly prevalent in India, we don't see that to such a large extent outside. And that determines to what extent and how fast we can move into this. So this is something that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. कि phone तो दादा के पास है, OTP उनके पास चले गया. But while she's coming for the loan, she will get it. But at the time of repayment, she does not have a phone. She's not given the phone. So on and so forth. There is a lot of...
But Sunil, when we talk about the microfinance industry, the money is actually lent to the woman, right?
It is.
In the household. So what's been your learning as Avanti Finance, as you've gone out and worked with communities in the unserved markets?
So one of the personal big learnings for me is, at a point of time I thought there is some unifying force, and maybe it is commerce or it is this or that. But what I fundamentally understood is that misery is a big unifying force. So it cuts across caste, creed, religion, etc. So I've sat down in places like Deoband to heartland of Rajasthan and the hinterland of UP. So everybody comes together when it is a question of money, and they come forward. But the biggest impediment for us to drive some of the tech-related innovations is the primary borrower is not having access to the phone, which is the screen phone as they call it, right? And that is something that we need to work and get through, which is where the role of community becomes pretty significant. And we have to drive some of these deep community level changes as we go along. But button phones, feature phones are all there. And that is where Aadhaar 1, 2, 3 and all of that stuff has significant play as we go along. And we need to amplify those.
So it's interesting, right? You're basically saying that phone penetration, smartphone penetration is an impediment still for financial inclusion, huh?
Yes. At least that's been our view so far.
Well,
at household level it is there.
Yeah.
But,
Well, we have a telco representation on the panel. What do you think about that, Gaurav?
I'm a bank I'm a bank representative, but our experience has been slightly different. And what we've seen is where women have the feature phones, they have the ability to transact. Probably they also tend to, once you empower them enough, they actually are willing to take all the actions that are required. And that's on the deposit side, maybe not on the credit side, but on the deposit side, what we've seen is women are willing to take those actions, and women are willing to sort of take up the ownership.
So Gaurav, just a small anecdote on a lighter side. So we tried this use case in Karnataka at a place. The entire village had 1, 2, 3, 4 as the UPI passcode, because they wouldn't remember their birth year, they wouldn't remember anything else. They keep asking, "Tumne kya number lagaya?" So everybody is 1, 2, 3, 4. So, some such stories are there, but it's interesting. But yeah,
Sunil,
sorry, go ahead, Ashwani.
This UPI 123, which is launched in March, is it not helping, which is the
it is yet to take off. Literacy is a big story. There is fear. See, what happens, Ashwani, is that I can feel cash, I can interact in cash, but the moment it's in a digital form and there is so much amount of information and exchange that is going on about the Jamtara and not to share the OTP and all of that stuff, and rightfully so, there is that fear. Ki hard-earned money at the click of a button, I don't know, it just disappears. Who do I talk to? And who do I get a help from? Highly discerning customers willing to pay for a service. So even if you charge them $200, they want you to come to the doorstep, have a cup of tea, and then take cash. So it is multi-layered sort of a problem. Community has to be there. Nandan puts this beautifully. He says it has to be Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar. So Sarkar also has a role to play if he can drive DBT and other stuff through this network. So
You said Samaj, Sarkar and
Bazaar.
Bazaar. सबको साथ में चलना है.
सबको साथ में चलना.
Wonderful. But do you see UPI working in rural India?
Oh, massively yes. Massively yes. So the uptick is there. The awareness is there. The only biggest impediment, and that is where people like yourself and Airtel, it's the cash burial problem, right? It is 5 hours, 6 hours away. That means half a day of wages, income gone. So if we can solve for that, the moment cash is buried, then there are thousands of solutions, which we see all around, right?
So basically, how do we get customers to deposit that cash
Exactly.
into a bank account
Exactly.
and then transact using the bank account?
Exactly.
That's the goal.
That's the goal. Then it is inflow, outflow happens through the bank account. You are starting to see an alternate data emerge. And these people are no longer in data dark. We can all rely on that data to underwrite and start giving more and more loans.
And Sunil, what are the kind of delinquencies you've seen as a rural-focused NBFC to date?
So, interesting one, Dilip. Just like the middle class Indians, our experience in Bharat has been people do want to pay. There is willful defaulters are very less. Most of the frauds and other issues we see is related to an agent or to a organization which intent is wrong. But at a borrower level, the seriousness and of repayment is very strong. So for us, it has been operating at around 2.5%. Mostly victims of circumstance rather than a willful default.
Well, we've got 10 more minutes before we close, 10, 15 minutes. I would like to bring the audience in, otherwise we can keep talking here. Yes, we've got questions from the audience. Has everyone got a mic for the... Yes, just quickly. If you could just introduce yourself and then the question, please. Do we have a mic coming? Yeah. Right in the middle. I think there's a lot of experience on the panel here, guys, so use this as an opportunity.
Yeah, so I'm Gaurav, I work for Goldman Sachs. So my question is, what kind of data do you use for these customers for underwriting? And yeah, coming to the data, how are we ensuring that at this point in time, they won't have their civil data, they won't have the record. So even they are getting included in the bureau as well.
Sunil, if we could start with you.
Okay, so the interesting point is about data in this context is our partner network. So when you're working with social partners or partners who are driving livelihoods, so we only do livelihoods income generating loans. So 3 fundamental things that we get. First and the foremost is the organization or the partner with whom we are working has a vintage in that particular geographic area. The partner typically tends to be an expert. If they don't have a vintage, they have deep expertise in that particular livelihood value chain. It can be agri, it can be poultry, it can be dairy, whatever it is. The third and the more important thing is that there is a transaction history between the partner organization and these individual borrowers. Now that it might not be codified and readily available, but it exists. So if you go to a microfinance, they still maintain those registers, right? So there is a bit of a transaction history that is there. What we try to land in is to get a sense of the character, which is how much do they participate in Anganwadi, to self-help groups, to other activities. What about their capacity to repay, which is the livelihood activities that they are involved in? Do they generate enough of cash flows that they are easily able to repay? And what is the credit that they are really good for? So if there is a lady who's coming and wanting to take a loan for a milch buffalo, it can go from 50,000 all the way till 1 lakh. So can we do the entire 1 lakh? Is there a traditional concept of LTV that we can put? These inputs typically come to us at a nuanced level, hyper-local nuanced level, by the partner who is there on the ground for us. And again, this comes in the form of a codification. So over a period of time, you are building this data for individual borrower, and our response and our ability to provide credit on tap is increasing by the day. Now, if you talk about agriculture, I gave a dairy example. You have now alternate data. There are companies out there which talk about soil suitability and market attractiveness. they're talking about what is the yield that typically the farmer provides. Syngenta Foundation does a phenomenal amount of work in this space. They have these agri-entrepreneurial program where they have this data there, right? So in essence, instead of reinventing the wheel, there is networks out there. If you can unlock those networks, get them into the platform, you're talking about a scale. You're talking something that works at a scale rather than scaling what works.
Gaurav, you want to talk a bit about data?
Yeah, so while we can't lend since we are a payments bank, however, a lot of lenders, like was being shared by the co-panelist, they look at the transactional data. So I'll give you a small example. A customer who comes in and renews or pays for his prepaid recharge on a monthly basis, he's considered to be a good customer, even if the recharge is a small value. Because this is a customer who's absolutely sure that he wants to make a recharge on the set date. Similarly, a customer who's bought insurance is considered to be a good customer, because these are all pseudo scores that are being developed. So when we give all of these transactional data or these pseudo scores around insurance, I think that's where the lenders help in giving out loans.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Can I have?
Yes, sure.
A very quick one, and I think it would be to Sunil, right? So on the rural funding, right? So we are talking about a small ticket loans, right? You said that the NPA is around 2 to 3%, which is very promising.
2.5.
2.5, which is very promising, right? But do you see that to maintain that NPA, you have to put in a higher operational cost? Because see, doing a recovery or even a normal payment collection from rural India, I mean, you have people walking down to the village and then collecting. Do you see a higher operational cost kicking in, which will actually increase the, the credit, rates and things?
So Rahul, what we started off was, and I'm sharing my perspective, Avanti's perspective is, we said, do we consider to be a collections business? Because that's the traditional notion, right? We are all in collections business, actually not in lending business. But we said, how will it look like if we say we are all actually in an assessment business? And who will provide us with the most nuanced assessment on an individual borrower on the basis of which we can actually lend? So we possibly are one of those few organizations who have an enterprise level metric as to how many new to credit customers have we given and how many risk and high risk customers have we given credit to. Because for us, part of the definition of unserved, underserved is also that, because we have to get these high risk and risk customers back into low risk and no risk domains. So assessment is important for us, which is enabled by the operating model through the partner network. The inputs that come from the partners, similar to what Gaurav mentioned, right? The alternate data, simple transaction history, and participation in social activities, location analysis. Is the person willingly contributing to the trade? So these social sensing inputs are of phenomenal importance, and our hope is once our model gets built in and the data starts kicking in, we will see some deterministic variables emerging out of this. So at least till date, to answer your immediate question, we have been able to maintain the costs. It is a risk because at the end of the day, somebody has to go and collect, but we are driving digital collections. E-Notch to Notch to UPI collect. These are green shoots. COVID actually slammed us down, but now the uptake will come through. So I don't know if I've answered, but it's a multiple stage assessments to pushing the payment solutions to the partners and managing the overall cost.
I can share with you and learning from our side. Microfinance companies have digitized a lot of the disbursement of loans, but still on the collections, they have the collection officers going into the villages, collecting money and going to the branches. What we've observed at merchant points of ours, which are digitally enabled, like Airtel Payment Bank, they're beginning to serve as collection points where some of these collection operators, who go to collect money, instead of coming back to the branch to deposit the cash, they actually deposit it at the merchant point in the village itself. And now, the BBPS platform, has onboarded multiple microfinance companies, which are now enabling customers to come and pay the loan themselves. So there's no need for even someone to come and collect the money. in the village, someone that the borrower trusts, they can actually come and pay the money. So it's also becoming a collection point. So to your point of how do we reduce cost of collections, one is the e-Nash and how you do it digitally, but also how do you reduce the process of travel and other costs associated with collections. There is a behavior we've observed where customers want to come and pay the money themselves, rather than someone coming and even collecting. We always assume that in microfinance, they're used to someone coming and taking the money. But what we've observed in some pilots we've run is that customers would rather just come and deposit the cash at a point that they trust, rather than someone coming and hassling them for the money itself. So new models are evolving on collections in rural. Yes, we have a question there, please. Yes.
So Sachin this side from IIT Delhi. So I will agree on the point of mobile and women enterprise. We did a experimental study in southern part of India, and preliminary results show that mobile training and loans play a very important role in developing micro enterprises. Coming to the point that how sustainability will be ensured in terms of like digital finance. We are seeing a lot of data in terms of mobile subscribers, or we see the transactions, payment transactions. So how we will ensure that, how sustainability, because repaying the finance, basically repaying the loan is very difficult task. Even neighbor is not paying money back to the neighbor. And I think he know very much about the neighbor. Still, there are many data points, but it's happening. So how we have seen the fate of other banks, NPAs, MFIs, and how now digital finance, how we will ensure that?
So I think if I can understand your question, you're basically saying, how do we ensure that digital finance models, where it's end-to-end digital, how do we build sustainable business models? I think, Sunil, you spoke about presence-less and paperless and a complete digital end-to-end journey. That's your mandate, right?
Yes.
So what would you say to this question saying, is it sustainable?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. That's where we started off our journey too. Most of the points, that we have seen is, as long as it is livelihood related, we can create a sort of an ecosystem. Now, the moment you get into a bit of consuming sort of lending, you get into a different terrain altogether, right? Now, it has got nuances. Now, a farmer wanting to buy a two-wheeler, is it a consuming sort of a loan, or is it part of the business? Okay. There is these edge cases which are there. But primarily, if you restrict it to livelihood-based or income-generating-based, then you have networks today on the ground, and you have sensors and early warning indicators that you can rely on. So you need to start building on that. But eventually, the way it moves is that once these people start having their own digital footprint, they will come to a position like you and me individually, that we walk in. Today, our credit history, the bureau data, everything is there. Oh, by the way, entire Bharat and these rural customers, they are paranoid about their bureau data. They actually ask you, high mark में जाएगा, कहाँ पे जाएगा? आप तो सब जगह पे भेज दोगे. So they know it. And if they default on it, they also know that the next loan will be coming at an exceedingly high rate, or possibly even no rate, no loan at all. So to that extent, livelihood related, that sensitivity is there, the reality is there. And if you can unlock the networks, and that is an experiment that Avanti is, we are able to see the sustainable part of it. And to be honest, we are also building out individual, what we call as income assessment reports. So we actually show them. A typical grocery bill at a rural household is about 150 rupees for a family of 4 to 4.5. So if you show the upliftment, power of compounding, and that is where I think the Airtel Payments Bank will be able to show. There is another Seva which clearly shows. You are able to see, and the transactions going on, digital footprint coming up, this will be less and less and more sustainability. And if you go back in time, when microfinance first came out, people asked the same question: how will 5 women sitting together, underwriting each other, how sustainable is this? Today, that business is like 2 lakhs plus kind of a crore kind of a business, right? So it will take time, but it is coming.
Okay, I've been told that we have space for one more question, but you can catch others on the panel later. I think that's where we go.
Hi, I'm Ojas representing DPD0. So the question I have is, how do you establish trust and drive digital adoption in tier 2 and below cities where, by using technology, because this is where the truly underserved market lies. So these guys are, again, not well educated. So how do you do that?
I guess we can have this question for every panelist to say something about. Maybe Gaurav.
Yeah, I'll start. The basic problem to solve, as you mentioned, is the trust. And one of the ways that we've adopted is by sort of appointing a local villager or a local tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 resident of that area to be our BC point. Now, the moment that happens, most of the villagers have at least a trust, ye kahin nahi jaane wala, because he's been here ever since. That's one. The second is what we've also started doing a lot is pushing videos, pushing WhatsApp videos. Now, what we've seen is WhatsApp, YouTube is extremely well sought after as compared to doing financial transactions. And therefore, the moment you start pushing stories, explaining them on WhatsApp, sending them animated videos, the customers, it helps them in sort of starting to gain the trust. The second is every time a customer tries to do a digital transaction, if you help him on an assisted mode for the first 3-4 times, and for that, if you are able to incentivize the BC point or the retailer, the 5th, 6th transaction, he starts doing it on his own. So it's about hand-holding, it's about educating, and it's about sort of deploying the right resource in the area. That's what we feel.
So I'll just tell you a small story. Right? So I don't know if you all know Google Friend. So there is somebody called as an Internet Sati. So in Tamil Nadu, along with Tata Trust, 18 to 35-year-old women, they were given these Android phones, and they said, go around and talk about this phone. By default, YouTube became the search engine. People were pressing the mic and saying it in Tamil or in other language. The video started coming in. So to that point, right, videos, and so suddenly there is a bit of an interest. So when there is a congregation, these young women are going around with an Android phone talking, and it's an experiment that has got proven. And in the process, these women who are showing them, they built this capability of understanding livelihoods and the kind of challenges that exists. Because the kind of questions that people were asking, where will I get this support for this particular cow or this so very nuanced understanding started emerging, and people said, oh, this has got all the answers. So the mindset which has now become over a period of time, 3 to 4 months, is, isko sab pata hai, we should know what to ask, right? And that's how evangelization happens. The second one is a very interesting example that we did at Katihar in Bihar. So there was a Beam Bhai. We insisted that you should pay only through digital. So this guy came and sat outside and said कि दीदी मैं आपका पैसा डिजिटल कर दूंगा, मेरे को 10 रुपए चाहिए. So they started seeing कि किस बात का 10 रुपए ले रहा है, and they understood and they talked, and from the 6th transaction they started doing themselves. And last nuance is in rural India there is a sense of pride. If you can teach somebody, if you don't know, and if they can teach somebody, that comes with a lot of pride and a lot of colors by itself. And those change agents are what you are looking for. And once you catch them, then the tipping point or the multiplier effect happens.
Well, thank you so much. We've run out of time, but I can only say this, that for many of us in the room, this is a great opportunity to chase. Can we build products that can cater to 1 billion people? We are in a country at a time that we have this opportunity. Let's not lose it. Let's grab it with both hands and let's chase it aggressively. With that, thank you very much to our panelists, Sunil, Ashwani, Gaurav, for taking our time. Thank you, everyone, and see you around. Take care.